So a year and a half in Exos, what do you like? What are like some main difference between college and like training at pro setting? Sorry, private setting. Sorry.
When it comes to how we program, I think on this side we're able to get a little bit more specific in how we program with the guys because I like guys 5 to 10 guys per group compared to you might have 25 or 50 or even 100 in a session, right? So you're able to get a little bit more specific in what their training needs are, especially when it comes to like our eval process that we use, right? Because that's kind of what dictates uh, how we train our guys. I think a big difference too is, in college, you might have a guy for a whole year, right? You're going to at least have them for a whole training cycle, right? For a semester or two with the training portal, with the transfer portal, you know how crazy it is. But you're going to at least have them for a whole summer or a whole winter or something like that. While here, you may only have a guy for 3 weeks, right? Tops is usually like 8 weeks. So you have to get really detailed into the approach and how you develop them to be able to kind of maximize what we uh, what they came here for, right? Because it's not like we have a lot of time with them, so you got to really pinpoint what we need.
Cool. So, can you share a little like over the past few years at college setting and now like 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 you mentioned, like the NFL like combine draft, it's like 8 week or like 12 week. So how does
Yep.
the past experience help you like uh build your program for like those 8 week or 12 week combine prep?
I think one thing that has always helped me, at least with the combine prep, is in 2017, I helped with at the Exos in San Diego. So I already kind of had an idea of the format and the flow of it. So that kind of helped. But everywhere I've been, we pretty much ran the same model that we kind of run here at Exos with our how we not so much how we periodize, but how we flow through the sessions and how we periodize throughout the week. It's pretty much the same. So it's been a really easy transition going from the team side to to the private side.
So how would you say that uh like in college setting you're gonna program for a whole year, right? But combine prep is 8 to 12 week. How do you peak your athlete like between 8 to 12 week?
Yeah, with our combine program has pretty much it's been they've made small tweaks in it, but it's been the same for probably the past 8 to 10 years, right? So, we always start off, you're gonna have a foundation phase, and then we're gonna, that'll be about maybe 2 weeks, and then we'll have what like a 4 week strength block, and we're really pushing in that time too, right? Like you go in max effort squat from pins, max effort bench, max effort bench from pins, trap bar, right? But then toward the back end and like the last 3 weeks, that's when we start to taper. And one thing you'll see too is I remember my first time through the whole program, the combine program last year. This is like week 6. The guys' numbers aren't very good, right? Everything's going down. I'm starting to stress out, like, yo, dude, this thing is like in 2 to 3 weeks. We have our pre-test coming up. Some guys aren't testing as good as they thought they were going to, and I was like, oh my goodness, like, what are we doing? I'm talking to my wife at home, like, maybe we messed up in the programming or something. But then once we hit our taper, it's crazy, right? Because I mean and then during that phase, the guys are doing a really minimal in the weight room, but they're still getting a lot of stimulus on the field. But uh, that taper is just what really hits and allows the guys to super compensate and get that training adaptation. Because we'll have a guy like just going from the start, the gains they get in that program, I was kind of skeptical at first, right? I'm a college guy. I used to be like, man, these guys just take our guys and take credit for it, woo, woo, woo. But we'll have a guy, we had a wide receiver. He started off, and yeah, he came after the season, all that stuff. But he ran what, a 4.78 on intake, and then he popped off at combine, what, like a 4.32. So it's like, what we do, the training is not very different than college. What's different is how everything gets integrated, right? From the nutrition to the PT and then the training. And then at the same time, too, maybe the dietitians on the team side always told these athletes, hey, you need to be doing this, you need to eat this, this, this. But these guys are like, screw that. I'm going to Taco Bell. But all of a sudden, when they get here, man, they'll drink their beet juice. They'll take any vitamin. They'll eat, whatever our chef makes them. Like they'll do every little thing to get that tenth of a second off. So, um, no, it's very impressive the things that we do here.
So from 4.78 to like 4.32,
And the
that's like,
crazy part though
yeah,
is he gained about 15 pounds while doing that. Usually you won't see that, right? You're gaining weight and doing that, right? I mean, it was, and then you're seeing his force plate numbers, right? His relative strength while it's still going up, while his strength, while his weight's going. It's just, you know, but he worked very hard. He worked very, very hard. He was very detailed, and anything you told him, he was very coachable. He'll fix just like that.
that's amazing. Did did you like specifically like help him with his like sprint mechanic? Does that like help a lot or like it's already there?
Uh, the horsepower is there, but the mechanics weren't there, right? So he just needed to clean up his backside or his back end. And Brent Calloway, he does all of our speed stuff. And I mean, he's an animal when it comes to, coaching the 40-yard dash. So he cleaned all that stuff for him. And man, it was he's very that that was that was a very cool experience seeing his transformation from week one to in 8 weeks.
That was like that was cool. Like 4.78 to like 4.3 4.32.
Yeah. I believe 4.32 or 4.34. Anything in the four threes from what that intake was impressive, especially with him gaining all that weight and
Yeah.
just yeah.
Does like does the number in the weight room like power clean, like squat also go up during those 8 week?
Yeah, yeah. Like this is the first time too for a lot of the athletes. They don't have class, right? Because you got to think that's stress too, right? You have 4 classes throughout the week, and you got practice. It's like the first time they just get to solely focused on their performance, right? You don't got to worry about X's and O's too much, at least on the field. Yeah, they got to do stuff on the board and all that, but it's just straight drag race, right? You just got to know how to go.
Nice. So, uh, would you say like be for the combine prep and like programming for a whole season, do you think that for the combine you mainly focus on speed because 40-yard dash is a big thing for combine, or like you focus on when you program like for a college team you also put speed the whole year long?
Yeah, and I think too, you know, it's so much more you have to program for so much more things on the team side, right? Because yeah, you have your pro agility L and all that, but 40 is what matters. So everything's focused on that. And so the volume, you'd be surprised too if you just looked at our cards. It's not a lot of volume at all. It's like not even close to the volume that the things that we do in college. Uh, but in college, you got to think, uh, you're preparing them for the demands of practice, right? So
So, after the combine prep, would you like would the focus on speed will be less or like it's gonna be the same before they go to the team?
so you're saying right after the combine's done?
Yep.
So once combine's done, yeah, it pretty much completely switches to more of like a team training, getting ready for OTAs type of deal. So the program completely changes.
Cool. So, I want to jump out the combines training. If we just focus on like football, um I remember last time we were talking about like different position, you use like different metrics on the GPS. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So the main metrics that I like to use is like total distance, anything over 3 miles an hour, right? High speed distance, I'll use that over like 12 miles an hour. Acceleration efforts, deceleration efforts, um, and max velocity.
So that's for like all all of them or like for just specific group.
I'd say that's for the most part for the whole team.
Cool. So when monitoring these like these metrics, I know load management is a big thing right now for like all the athlete. So how do you like monitor the load or like yeah, just load management?
So I think that's more like in season, and I think with that you have to have a really good relationship with the head coach, right? Because the head coach is going to want to install what they want to install, and they've been doing it for a long time too. They're professionals at what they do, right? So I think it's more so uh, knowing the athlete and knowing over time, like, okay, these are the things that he can handle, these are things he can't handle. But I think too, uh, it's that's why like the summer training and the all the off-season training is so important because our job is to make sure they're able uh, to take the demands of practice and be able to uh, you know be able to go through practice without getting injured. So like, one thing that a lot of I was talking to a coach about this last night. A lot of uh teams and strength coaches like the high-low approach, right? From Charlie Francis. And I remember for me, it was like, and I knew during fall camp, our coach, he's not going to do a high-low. It's pretty much high, 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 off, high, 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 off. You know what I'm saying? So if we continue to do a high-low approach, they're not going to be able to, their body's not going to be adapted to what they're going to hit during camp, and their acute chronic load is going to really spike. So for me, especially like of that last 3 weeks of summer training, I mean, we're going like 5 days straight with a really high type of model to really get that chronic load up. So then when they get to camp, they're going to be ready for those loads. But then, we have a week off after that 3 week mini camp that I like to run. But yeah, so I think that high low approach, it's I mean it's good if you're really trying to just build performance, but I think at the end of the day, like practice is what's going to build their performance, right? So how do we get the guys to be able to practice hard, and that's what's going to transfer to the game.
Nice, nice. I like your approach. Like, uh, because I think a lot of times what the coaches want to do maybe don't always coincide with what like we learn from like the textbook or like
Yeah.
the papers. Because like basically what like probably the papers say like towards the game, towards the season, you want less and less and less volume. But like that's not probably not what coaches want. And you also mentioned that having a good relationship with the coach, the athlete, will help you. So, uh, can we? I want to dive a little bit more on this one. Like you mentioned, like maybe it's like usually what we do is high, low. But like you mentioned, if it's high, high, high and off, high, high, high and off, um, how do like exactly like how do you handle that and prepare athletes for that?
Now, okay, so like in what phase?
If
Like in season or in a prior to season camp type of deal?
if
And
we're
we could even
talking if we're talking about in season,
yeah. Now, I think one thing with in season, coaches are getting better at all right, we got to keep our guys fresh, right? So I know one thing that I kind of talk to our coaches about is like, okay, hey, especially if it's a high power, if it's like an air raid type offense, right? Because the the team's load is going to be dictated off of the offense, right? Because the defense is going to be going against the offense and those kind of routes because they're defending those kind of things. So one thing that I kind of told him was like, okay, hey, like, okay, if this is okay, we have a game on Saturday. All right, our first practice is what on Monday. All right, have that be kind of like a low type of day, and then maybe have Tuesday be like the kind of the highest day. But then on the back end of the week where you want it to be a lower volume, you could just make it more condense the yardage by going red zone, right? So instead of going like 50 and in, you might go everything from like 20 yards and in. It'll cut down the total distance of the running for the players.
cool, cool. So, do you ever like encountered like situation you have like some kind of hard conversation with the coach, like the coach want to do more, but you're like uh you, like try to tell the coach they probably want to do less for the athlete.
Yeah, and I think one thing too is if there's going to be anyone that needs to adjust, because coaches some a lot of times won't adjust, it's going to be we have to adjust on our side. So, all right, if the coach is kind of pushing it, he's like, okay, we got to get this in, da 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 da. We know in the weight room, it's like, okay, look, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut this. This is going to be more like a regen in the weight room, right? So, a lot of times the sport coaches aren't going to be the ones that adjust a lot. It's going to be us that need to adjust what we want to do. Because a lot of times too, like I think every like the strength coach, like the position coach or the trainer, everyone thinks their piece is the most important, but not thinking that all right, everything all the stress is in one. So all right, I want to do I had this programmed out already for since 3 weeks ago or from a month out, and this is what we want now. Like you have to be able to adjust on the fly, right? And
Yeah.
that's why you gotta have really good coaches and assistants that are able to adjust.
I think that's like real life, right? You have to adjust all the time. You're not gonna like follow the program all year long.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I think one thing that is good though is like okay, you might have everything laid out just to at least have a blueprint, right? But you know, how many times have we done that? You know, every coach here listening and you included, we have the whole plan laid out, and you know, I don't think anyone's ever followed it to a T, right? So
Yeah, yeah. So, go back to like the load management question. Since there's like we mentioned like force plate, like GPS, does like these tech does having those technology change your approach to load management, or like because like because of like past experience, like these kind of like just only like help you decide, but it's about the same.
I think it does, especially like things like what, like RSI is a big indicator of stress, right? So when you kind of see these things, especially if it's over time or if it's an athlete that hasn't hit 90% and he's had the opportunities to hit 90% of his max velocity, you know, you could kind of talk to the coach. And a lot of times too, you might not talk to the head coach. It might even be just go to the position coach's office and be like, hey, you know, he hasn't hit this in some time. All right. You know, what are some of the issues that are going on? All right. Is he taking a lot of reps? Okay, I know or is he injured? Does he have stuff going on outside of the building? Right. Um, but I think one thing too, here's a funny one that it's like, okay, you know, we had an athlete, he was injured, right? We rushed him back, right? Because we need this guy for this game. And I'm looking at the GPS numbers. I'm like, yo, this dude has not done anything close to what a game looks like. And he practiced for one day, right? It's like he hasn't done anything close to what he's done. And then from contacts and everything, right? But then he goes in the game and he goes crazy. And then the week of the game, I'm going talking to the DC like, hey, you know, I'm scared he's gonna get hurt or he's gonna get injured. He just hasn't had that kind of loading. He hasn't even sprinted in like 3 weeks. But then he goes in and he does his thing, right? And he finished the season off clean. So I think that, you know, these guys are 18 to 22 years old, 23 years old, man. These are like robust machines, right? So I think there's times it might be a little bit different in the professional level where they're a little bit older, right? And their body may not be able to uh, take the kind of loads that because they've just had so many reps over the years. But I mean, these guys are resilient, right? So um, sometimes you just got to let them go.
Nice, nice, nice. So, besides load management, I want to ask another question about like watching like watching like how athlete moves on the field. So, do you also like see like how many change of direction they have during a game or during a practice?
Yeah. So yeah, because you're getting all that stuff from all the GPS stuff, and that's pretty much how we'll periodize uh summer training. Can I
So,
share my screen right here with you?
yep,
Did you
yep,
just share your
yep,
screen?
yep.
Let's try
Where is?
doing this real fast. I was just looking at uh it's disabled. I think you have it disabled.
Yep. I think you can share it now.
Um I'd like to zoom in. You probably can't see this, huh? Can you see this?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, so one thing that a lot of what I've always ran into is like, okay, in the past, right? And this is before I kind of started this kind of model, is like, man, all right, so football practice is what It's about 2.5 hours, right? If you include everything. And then like, okay, how do you get that kind of volume in our training, right? Because you have 2 hours. And all right, usually it's like an hour on the field, hour in the weight room, something like that, right? So what I started doing is I would get like our practice script, from our coaches, or I would look at old practice scripts, and I would kind of just, and this is like in our mini camp type deal, I would program based off kind of what the periods looked like when they hit camp. So like, okay, we'll warm up usually, and this is like this is what we did. This is July week 1, July 11th, 2 years ago at Washington State. Um, and this for the defensive backs. So boom, we prior to the session, guys would show up like 20 minutes ahead and do all their pillar prep work. So they get all their soft tissue work and all that stuff. So then we have more time to do, you know, the actual work, right? Instead of all right, you're spending 20 minutes of pillar prep, movement prep, and all that stuff in a session. What we started doing is all right, we made like cards for the guys. We put them outside or we put them on our racks, and the guys would kind of go through all that stuff prior to the session. And then they would go through our warm up, right? Just kind of our basic warm up stuff. And this is like period 0. So this will be 8 minutes right here. And then we'd get into our indie period where these are defensive backs where they would just kind of flow through some of their positional movements, these level 2 movements. And then we'd come together as a group and then we'd do some build-ups, right? At 90%, some fly-ins, and then we do like a pursuit drill. So they're getting like 150 plus yards at this, they're getting 90 yards at this. And then we'd go into another indie session, right? At period 3, where they're doing a lot of more change of direction, positional type change of directions, positional type stuff, right? But then we had like an outdoor tent set up. And I started that outdoor tent setup during COVID, right? Because you remember COVID, everyone had to train outside and all that stuff. Uh, so we bought all these racks and we would train outside and the guys actually liked it, right? So then I was like, you know what? I think we could kind of do something like this, but I could kind of tailor it more into uh, how it would look at practice. So, boom, we did all this, all the movement stuff, but then we'd go into our tent, outdoor tent, and during the period, I had all of our equipment guys, our facility guys, they set up this giant outdoor tent setup. We had like 10 racks in it, TRXs, bench, we had everything in there, trap bars, everything. But then so then period 4 would simulate like an inside run period. So it's like that's like a high collision period during practice. So in my mind, I'm like, all right, this will be when we do a lot of our strength stuff, right? So we did our trap bar deadlift, some of our landmine stuff, kettlebell rough and elevated, all that good stuff. But then we'd go back outside and we'd kind of blend some strength and some movement stuff with like run rocket, double uppercut, one man sled stuff, wrestler shot, transition hydration. I know I'm going on and on, but then we do some more tracking stuff and then a competition thing, O&D, but then we go back to pursuit. And with this kind of model, we were able to get, like player loads of like 600, which they would be hitting in practice. But they're getting like a inside outside type cross combo type of training compared to just like all right movement, all right, and then we're gonna lift. Because like I keep saying, it's like all about getting them prepared for practice. So I wanted to just combine stuff. We're not doing a max velocity day and the change of direction. It's everything's just blended, right? Because that's that's what that's what practice is.
Nice.
And this is like during the last 3 weeks.
Nice, nice. So does like this mixed approach not like focus just on max velocity day, linear sprinting day? You're gonna go on for like whole year?
Uh Say it again.
Cause I know at Exos you do like linear speed, then multi-directional movement, but like you mentioned, you kind of mix it up. Does like this mixing linear sprinting and multi-directional like movement focus like goes on the whole year?
No, so usually I'll use the kind of the split type days where if it's a linear day, a or linear acceleration day, multi-directional day, a max velocity day, condition type day. I'd usually do that in the first like 5 weeks. And then, because usually in the winter we have 8 weeks and then it's spring ball. And then summertime, usually we have 8 weeks and then it's fall camp. So usually in the last 3 weeks, this is when I kind of did this mini camp kind of approach just to get their bodies accustomed to what they're going to hit in
Nice.
practice.
Nice. This is probably the first time me like learning like this mixed approach. Does the athlete handle like the first few weeks just linear speed and multi-directional day is different and then the last 3 weeks mixed? Does the athlete handle it well?
I mean, it's going to be a shock, but we usually have a week off before. Like, so it's like in the wintertime, right? You get 8 weeks and then it's spring break and then it's spring ball. In the summertime, it's 8 weeks and then they have a week off and then it's fall camp. So knowing that, I know they're going to be able to recover from that first through that 3 week mini camp phase.
Cool, cool. So that's probably enough for the training question. So the next part of the podcast I kind of want to ask like something like uh for all those years at like pro setting, no, sorry, college setting, and now you're at private setting like Exos, like what are like the main focus right now for you to like grow as a coach?
I think right now for me, it's not even so much because I'm not doing a whole lot of coaching on the floor, right? Um, I think for me, it's more so understanding, okay, how do the PTs work? And what is like their approach to rehab, right? The dietitians, right? What is their approach during each phase, and how do they periodize what they do based off what the athlete needs? And then just I've been visiting pretty much I'd say like once a month I'll go to a organization just to see what they're doing, right? And uh seeing, okay, like what ingredients can I steal from them, right? Because I think that's what it's all about. It's about, okay, what are these people doing? What are they people doing? What are the best in the world doing that you can take and kind of try to see the things that you could fit that could better, you know, our system or my system.
Nice. I like this because uh being a strength coach at like college level, you probably need to like understand like at the beginning you probably need to understand like the game demand and then you probably try to figure out like the coach's style of like training and what is style of coaching during the game and athletes like personality, all those stuff. But like this, like understanding like the how the physical therapists work, how the that dietitian work, how do you think that's gonna help you like uh build up your own system in the future?
I think already more because the PTs have such a good understanding about, biomechanics and how the body moves and how to restore some of those movements. Um, so even well, I've been here a year and a half, and I've been looking at some of my old programs like, okay, I could have done this a little bit different. I could have done this a little bit different. I could have, or even having I used to call them blitz packages, where post training or when guys come in and do extra work, it doesn't always have to be uh, body armor type movements where you're okay, we got to get stronger neck, shoulder, those kind of things. It's like, okay, we got to just make sure we're able to clean up some of those movements. And that's the time that you're able to do that, right? When they come in and do their extra stuff. Uh, so I think that, but then too, like my overall goal is to be like a director of performance in college or the NFL, right? So the more you understand, I really understand the performance piece in the S&C piece, but the more you understand all the other pieces, the more you could kind of help facilitate and help make their jobs better once someday when I'm in that kind of role.
Nice, because uh I I kind of like last few months when I work with college basketball, I kind of like have these conversations with like my colleagues. We talk about like why are there like more like PT doing SNC work and like SNC trying to like learn from PT. And some of the coaches were saying like even now when I'm actually at home at Taiwan and learning from like PTs right now and uh they're saying like PT should just focus on like PT. SNC just should just focus on SNC. But like I always think that if you learn more from like if I learn more from the PT side, how they like how the body moves, how to like assess movement or like assess like low back pain where does the low back pain come from? I think that's gonna help me be like a better coach.
Yes. Yeah. And well, one thing that's so cool about Exos as a whole too is like our PTs are dang near strength coaches, right? So if you see them on the floor, they're coaching no different than us, right? So and I think it all just comes down to just really being curious, right? Not just being in your box. It's like, okay, what do I got to do to make sure that I can develop that athlete the best as I can? And the more that's cool too is like the more you learn and the more value you add to yourself, the more value you could add to the players, right? So it's like it's two and two.
Cool. So also, can you just like share like what are some stuff you learned from like the PT or what are the conversation you had with those PT?
I think the biggest one is like I think we talked about this last time is like the importance of internal and external rotation and just how the fascial slings work and how they feed into each other because right anything deceleration wise or coiling is going to be internal rotation, right? Uncoiling or propulsive or accelerative type, extensive type, extension type movements. It's external rotation. So, uh, it's like, all right, you know, linemen always lack internal rotation while they have a lot of external rotation. Is because the thing about their sport, they're always just coming out of their stance, right? They're not having to decelerate a lot while receivers, they usually have pretty good internal rotation, but they're doing so much uh, decelerating, right? And so much coiling. So understanding all those pieces kind of helps dictate, okay, what they need during what time in their training phase.
Cool, cool. I Yeah, I'll say like understanding like internal rotation, external rotation with uh like pushing or like absorbing the force. That that kind of like change how I view change how I do my programming. So does it like so understanding like internal rotation and external rotation, how does that like change your programming?
Yeah, so like I'd say like early on in a like early like let's say we have 6 weeks with the guy, right? Or if it's 6 weeks leading up to camp or 8 weeks leading up to camp, early on we're doing a lot of ISOs and eccentrics, but doing things that feed more into, you know, especially, deceleration's big right now, right? Everyone's into deceleration right now, but like, because it is one of the most important things in sport. But knowing that it's like you don't have to only train it on the field. You could do those things in the weight room by, you know, like using the vaso strap, or, different ways of loading, right? Ipsilateral versus contralaterally. So, um, I don't know if that answered the question, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I do love those movements. I try to implement those movements like probably all year long.
because even like rear foot elevated, like even you could even do rear foot elevated. If you even do rear foot elevated goblet style, and you're as you're going down, rotating and pressing into the hip or rotating out toward, right, of the flexed hip, right, is going to help feed into that movement, and right, and kind of get the athlete into that pattern and clean up that pattern.
Nice, nice. I like it. I like it. So, uh, besides like internal rotation, external rotation, besides the stuff you learn from like PT, how about some stuff you talk about with the dietitian?
I think what a real interesting one is like muscle to bone ratio. Are you familiar with that yet?
No, no, not
Yeah,
really.
so okay, so it's a I don't even know what he is, but it's this guy Francis Holloway. He's in Argentina, and he did a lot of work with rugby and soccer, and you get these Cananthro measurements, and you'll get the athlete's muscle to bone ratio, and it's pretty much like kind of based off the athlete or the person's the weight of their skeleton. So based off that, you kind of know that, okay, this guy could add more weight, or he's already maxed out, because like we had this basketball player. He plays overseas in Japan now. I think he's probably like 7 feet tall, but his skeleton weighed as much as our intern that was like 5'5". And this is a guy, he's maybe 200 something pounds, like 210, maybe at 7 foot, which is pretty light, right? And he's a guy that's like, okay, he always, the agents and everything that coaches want him to add weight. He needs to put weight on. He needs to put weight on. But then, you know, based off his muscle to bone ratio and the weight of his skeleton, he's already dang near maxed out on the weight that he could put on, and the weight that his skeleton could hold. So yeah, you might get some weight on him, but your body's gonna do uh what it's gonna want to get into what's like what homeostasis or what it's most comfortable at. So they're just gonna lose it right away. So I'm sure you've had athletes like that, right? Where it's like, okay, maybe not so much in basketball, but in football, always it's like, oh, he needs to get more weight. He needs to get more weight, right? And the fingers get pointed at us when they can't get weight on. When it's like, look, some of these guys, I wish we had this. I wish I had this back then. And I know a lot of teams don't use it yet, but I know a lot of NFL teams use it now. Is like, uh, that could dictate, like, if you get a tight end and he's 250 pounds, and when you're recruiting him, all right, and he has a muscle to bone ratio of like 4.4 or 4.5. Like he could gain 50 pounds and be a really athletic offensive lineman, right? Compared to, you might have an old lineman that they recruit and he's 280 pounds and he's already maxed out, but they're saying, okay, he needs to get 30 pounds on him, but his body's not going to be able to hold it, right? So I think that's going to be the big thing when it comes to recruiting, is like, I don't even know how that would work with compliance, but getting in the recruiting process, all right, what are his Cananthro measurements and his muscle to bone ratio to know, okay, what can he potentially turn out to be?
Nice, nice, nice. Man, I like it. I like it. So, uh, before I let you go, I still want to emphasize this because I think like uh I do think that learning from different like not just strength coach, maybe PT or maybe dietitian or maybe athletic trainer that do help us grow as a coach. And at the end of the podcast, can you like also like uh talks about like how does this help you grow and what are some future goals for you to learn?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, it's all about just being curious, right? And the more that we understand the athlete and how to develop the athlete as a whole, not just their performance, but um, to help them be able to adapt from the training better, right? Or from a rehab standpoint, help them be able to get them back to the court or the field faster. That's what it's all about, right? So in order to do that, I mean, you should we should always be seeking uh, to learn from the best, so we can continue, like I said, add value to ourselves. Because at the end of the day, the more value that we add to ourselves, the more we can add to the athlete, right? Um, and then what was the last question?
Like what are like some future goal for you to learn? Like or some stuff you want to learn in the future, sorry.
I think for me, it's like it always comes for me. It's always like, okay, how do we like profile the athlete the best in their like recruiting stage? Because it's all about getting the best horses in the stable. So like, how do we find what are the kind of key things that we have to look for? Yeah, you have the kind of like the height, weight, kind of the basic stuff, game tape. But is there is there more things that we could find that we could profile the athlete to project possibly like what they could be? You know, there's a company called AI. Well, it's a company that a lot of soccer teams use, like Manchester United, uh, Arsenal, teams like that. And it's an app, and they have like a battery of drills that they put the athlete through, and you just videotape it. But they have like an AI algorithm that's like seeing all the segmentals and seeing how they move and the times and and based off that, if an athlete has like good measurements, because all of it's based on because the athletes on their teams use those same drills. So based off of that, you know, when you upload it, if the numbers are good, it'll ping to their scouting department, which is very interesting, right? And then from there, they start to do a deeper dive. And then, okay, if they like it, then they'll reach out to the athlete and have them come up and do some more testing. So things like that, right? Where it's like, think about how many athletes there are in the world, Africa, just everywhere, right? Where it's like, okay, how do we find these best athletes and how do we get them on a team or get them to the States, to get on the team.
Nice. That's a really interesting one. This is the first time of like hearing that app. That's awesome. That's cool.
Yeah,
I'm
it's like
look into that.
yeah, I'll try to find it and I'll send it to you. It's like AIOQ or something.
Cool, cool. So still, for those who are interested in what we're talking about today, especially like the high low approach and how your approach to like camp and spring ball, where can they find you?
I'm easily to you can find me on Instagram. I think it's at Coach D Bradshaw. Uh, and you could just DM me and man, we could talk for days on it.
Nice.